name is Anthony Kern, and I recently got elected to the State House of Representatives in Legislative District 20. Appreciate you all coming here this afternoon. I know you're all busy, and appreciate you being here. I was just handed this just the other day, so if I'm reading, pardon me, I was handed this about 30 minutes ago, and I was asked the other day to moderate, so if I'm taking a little bit longer than expected, please bear with me. We have 4 panelists. We have 2 that are against, again, the Article 5 convention. The first panelist is Jeff Lewis. He is sitting to your far left. He is the National Director of the Patriot Coalition. Jeff is a veteran of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm and 4-time cancer survivor. Over the past 9 years, Jeff has testified before state legislatures across the country, consulted and advised federal, state, and local candidates for office on immigration, national security, and constitutional issues, including presidential candidates in the 2008 and 2012 elections. He's conducted briefings before members of Congress, state legislators, and hosted national security conferences across the country. Jeff dedicates his life to restoring constitutional governance and law and order to our once great republic. Seated next to Jeff is Richard D. Fry. Mr. Fry is General Counsel of the Patriot Coalition. Mr. Fry received his MBA and doctorate from the University of Kansas and has been a civil litigation attorney for over 15 years. He has dedicated his time and experience full-time to the liberty movement since 2007. Mr. Fry teaches the Constitution and has spoken to groups on the dangers of an Article 5 convention, the importance of original jurisdiction, and the egregious citizen detention provisions of the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, commonly known as the NDAA. He has also presented on constitutional militias, the citizen grand jury, duties of a sheriff, constitutional nullification, and immigration issues. He co-authored legislation for city, county, sheriffs, and states to resist the NDAA. Mr. Fry also has helped redraft the grand jury law in 2013 for Kansas to stop prosecutorial abuses. He has also consulted and advised members of Congress, their staff, and state legislators, as well as testified before multiple state legislative committees, conducted briefings for state legislators and members of Congress, and spoken at press conferences and in briefings on Capitol Hill. The 2 candidates are 2 debaters, 2 panelists that are pro-Article 5 convention are Nick Dranias and Shane Krauser. We'll start with Nick Dranias. He's the president and executive director within the office of the president of Compact for America Educational Foundation. He serves as an expert with the Heartland Institute and the Federalist Society. He previously served as general counsel, steering committee member, policy development director, and constitutional policy director for the Goldwater Institute, where he directed the Institute's Center for Constitutional Government. He led the Goldwater Institute's successful challenge to Arizona's system of government campaign financing to the U.S. Supreme Court. He also serves as constitutional scholar, authoring scholarly articles dealing with a wide spectrum of issues in constitutional and regulatory policy. His articles have been published by leading law reviews, bar journals, and think tanks across the country. One of Mr. Dranias' recent works is Article 5 2.0, the Compact for a Balanced Budget. Seated next to him is Shane Krauser. Shane did his undergraduate work at Arizona State University and earned his law degree at the University of Utah. He's director of American Academy for Constitutional Education. Mr. Krauser is an adjunct professor of constitutional and criminal law. He's a certified NRA firearms instructor and the chief instructor at K-Force Vanguard. Mr. Krauser is also the author of Your Nation to Save, a book that explains the U.S. Constitution. He hosts Liberty Storm, a radio talk show in Arizona. Shane has spoken to groups and organizations all over the country. He has appeared on radio and TV, has written for various national media outlets, spoken at patriotic rallies, addressed large crowds at political and corporate conventions, guided expert panels with numerous political figures, and educated audiences of all sizes and demographics. Let's give these guys a round of applause. Okay, our format today. Unfortunately, even with an hour and a half, hour to debate and 30 minutes for questions, time is extremely limited. We'll likely go long. Okay, Marcus wrote this, so bear with me. We'll probably go on for a long time. Each side will have 10 minutes for opening statements. For each question, each panelist will have 3 minutes to respond, with the sides taking turns to respond, so there can be real point-counter-point style discussion. Once we get to audience questions at the end, please be brief in posing your questions, as time is extremely limited and we anticipate many will have questions. After the event, I'm sure the panelists would love to stick around and answer the audience's questions one-on-one. So I guess we're going to start off with opening statements, and Mr. Dranias and Mr. Krauser will go first in that order, and each will have 5 minutes for their opening statements.
You know, just to change things up, I'll yield to Shane to open, and I'll follow Shane, if that's all right.
All right, very good. First and foremost, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Fry, thank you for this opportunity. It's an absolute pleasure to have you in Arizona to have this debate. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to talk about the things that we believe in and have a debate about this. It was Thomas Jefferson who said, when all power is concentrated in D.C., we ultimately will become as venal and oppressive as the very country that we departed from. And as we look at what's going on in this country, I have to ask the question, who is tired of the runaway convention going on in Washington, D.C. today? There is a runaway convention going on. You have a president that has not just threatened, but has actually utilized that pen and a phone. And in addition to that, he not only has utilized his pen and a phone, he has accomplices. 435 members in the House of Representatives, 100 members of the Senate, individuals that gave him a standing ovation at his State of the Union address. They're accomplices. In addition, you have a U.S. Supreme Court that has simply allowed them to do what they continue to do. That is, the General Welfare Clause is one clause that has been absolutely exploited in our Constitution. And why? Well, because the U.S. Supreme Court has allowed the Congress, the House and the Senate, to do just that. What does that mean? Well, if we want to give out free stuff, we can give out free stuff. We can adulterate what the General Welfare Clause was ultimately designed to do, what it ultimately meant at the inception in 1788 when it was ratified. We can look at the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause has been absolutely abused. It does not mean anything remotely like what it was originally in the original intent at the time that the Constitution was ratified. At this point in time, you have a Commerce Clause that means almost nothing. I mean, you have the Solicitor General in front, the Solicitor General under President Clinton, who was asked by Justice Scalia, can you name one piece of legislation that possibly could be introduced that would not survive constitutional muster under the Commerce Clause analysis? He couldn't name one piece of legislation, even hypothetically, that would not have survived that analysis under the Commerce Clause. So why is it that Congress continues to abuse the General Welfare Clause? Why is it that Congress continues to abuse the Commerce Clause? The answer is very simple. Because the interpretation of the U.S. Supreme Court allows them to do those things. So how are we going to restrain these individuals in Washington, D.C.? Well, I think a great starting point would be to start talking about this Commerce Clause, because they are not going to restrain their own power. The only way we start to restrain power is by us stepping up and recognizing ultimately who's sovereign. Who is sovereign? We, the people, are sovereign. The states are sovereign to a large degree. And we need to start taking back our powers. Let's just start with the first paragraph of the Constitution itself, outside of the preamble. It talks about all legislative powers herein granted are vested in Congress. Is that being obeyed? The very first paragraph in the Constitution, is that being obeyed? Of course not. We have 250 bureaucracies that impose over 6,000 regulations on the American people every year. And who are they accountable to? Not us. And they're not even really accountable to Congress. Congress has allowed these entities, these bureaucracies, to steal their power away from them, thus adulterating, once again, the Constitution itself, Article 1, Section 1. So I would submit that this debate really revolves around this. Whose interpretation of the Constitution is going to win? Because this is a fight for the interpretation of the Constitution. Are we going to continue to allow Washington to do what it is that they've been doing for so long? Or are we going to do something proactively? Proactively, and I'm not just suggesting that Article 5 is the only remedy. It's one of many remedies. What we've got to do is exactly what the other side has been doing for so long. They hit us from so many sides that we don't know what's coming at us. What I'm suggesting is we use things like Article 5, among a number of other solutions, and we watch these people recoil like a vampire to sunrise service. That's kind of the idea, to start to utilize the tools that are available to us. Let's use those things. Let's start to restrain government, because this federal government is not going to restrain its own power. Only when people with courage will stand up and say, let's utilize the tool. Article 5, it was put there for a reason, to start to restrain these people who care nothing about liberty. They care primarily about one thing. Thomas Sowell said it: elections and re-elections. Thank you.
Before you begin, sir, if you people need a seat, there's some seats in here. Feel free to come in here and use them. Right over here. And yeah, come on in here. This is your house.
Thank you.
Not that one.
Not that. Do you want to take the seat next to the timer?
Except for that.
That belongs to somebody else.
If you want to take the seat next to the timer, you can.
I'll sit back there.
Yeah, if we could hold back the applause, it's going to squelch on our time. So, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Dranias.
Well, everybody knows where I stand, which is why I was glad to let Shane take the lead. We've been doing this now, this debate, for 4 years since the Goldwater Institute, under my leadership in the Constitutional Policy section, published the latest research on Article 5. And here's the bottom line. No serious scholar, no serious constitutional litigator contends any longer that the states were not meant to control and target the Convention for proposing amendments under Article 5. That is the bottom line. These gentlemen, I don't know who they are or where they came from, other than that they're gracious enough to sit down at this panel with me and have this discussion. All I can say is go to www.compactforamerica.org, go to our various blog sites, and you can get the latest information that tells you that people like George Will, Judge Napolitano, Kevin Goodsman, Mark Levin, myself, infinite numbers of modern-day scholars have looked at the evidence and have concluded that there's simply no doubt that the states were meant to control the convention process and to target it to desired amendments. That is simply a fact. And to the extent that they're going to dispute those facts, I've only got 6 minutes to make an opening case. So I can't reach into my pocket and pull out every single item of evidence that is now populating the dozens of constitutional scholars and litigators who have made this point over and over and over again. But let me just give you a couple of very clear examples. George Washington, in a personal letter to his friend John Armstrong in 1788, trying to convince him that he should support ratification of the Constitution, said, "Don't worry, if we got the mix wrong, we can have, quote, 9 states obtain whatever amendments they wish." 9 states is the 2/3 threshold that it takes for a convention to be called under Article 5 at that time. He clearly understood that the states calling for applying for a convention could specify those amendments. In addition, you have no less than the Federalist Papers to look to, not once but twice. Federalist 43, written by James Madison, says specifically the states have an equal power with the general government, meaning the federal government, to originate amendments of errors. Federalist number 85, the last of the Federalist Papers, written by Alexander Hamilton, no big fan of state sovereignty, mind you, focused the entire piece on how the states could rely on their state legislatures to erect barriers to an overreaching national authority. And we know that he was talking about the application process for a convention because that's the only part of the process that the states truly, directly, and only control. So, folks, the founders have been shouting at us now for 200 years. Use this process, the states control it, and nobody who takes state sovereignty seriously can ignore those statements if you believe in the original meaning of the Constitution. All you are left with is a debate over political predictions. The only debate that should exist is whether it's likely a convention for proposing amendments will be utilized as a coup d'etat, and that the American people will stand by while it happens and say, okay, whatever you want. And I submit to you that is currently crazy. That is not going to be the vehicle for a coup d'etat anytime in the near future. In the near future, we will have still a majority of Americans, as evidenced in the last elections, that will never tolerate a convention that didn't follow the mandate given by the states. That would reject it, would demand that their legislatures reject it, and it takes 38 states to ratify anything that came out of a convention. That means just 13 of 99 state houses can block anything that comes out of a convention. The idea today that is not a solid safeguard to protect us against anything that might happen at a convention that we don't like is ridiculous. And let me just emphasize this, it won't be that way forever. The trajectory of our country right now, culturally and demographically, is not for enhanced respect for the Constitution. In about 5 to 10 years, those who are anti-constitutionalists will have pathways to many amendments that could secure 38 states. And here's the thing. Raise your hand if you believe in unilateral disarmament. Because the reality is, if we don't use Article 5 when we can win, I guarantee you, the anti-constitutionalists will when they can win. And then we lose. So let's stop this debate and come together. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hear from the other side now. Mr. Jeff Lewis, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Fowler's going to go first.
There really is only one question that we have to ask ourselves, and that is, why should any of us believe that our public servants who have failed to uphold their sacred and solemn oath to support the Constitution for over 100 years now will all of a sudden start obeying the Constitution and upholding their oath if we hand them a new Constitution? It defies logic. For purpose of this debate, we will concede that whatever rules or who will make up the rules will be as the proponents say. So if they say the states make the rules, the states are going to make the rules. And if they say the states are in control, we'll say the states are in control. We'll even say that the delegates will be angels, and in fact we're going to be conservative angels. And the chairman of this convention is going to be the Archangel Michael. They will get every amendment they want, they will get the exact language they want, and it will be ratified faster than any other amendment. And when it is presented to Congress and the President, it will have a holy glow about it. Again, I ask you, do you think that these politicians that have thumbed their noses at us and turned away from their sacred oath to uphold that Constitution are now all of a sudden going to obey it? Does anybody really believe that? The other problem that we have is, have they really identified the correct problem? They say the problem is a runaway federal government. I say that's a symptom. It's not a problem, it's a symptom. What's the real problem? Ask yourself, why do our public servants not uphold their oath? Why don't they follow the Constitution? Isn't the answer to that we, the people, the sovereigns and masters of this country, have failed to hold our servants accountable? Isn't that the real problem? Isn't that the thing that we need to work on? Isn't that the solution? We have states that are accepting federal dollars that the federal government has no authority to offer. Most states have 40 to 50% of their budgets are federal dollars. The feds have no authority to issue it, and yet our state governments continue to accept it. They're pimping out our liberty, and we allow them to do that. So what is the solution? Doesn't the solution rest with us? If we do not change our attitude, if we do not hold them accountable, no matter what amendments you make, it will not matter. If you hold them accountable, you will need no amendments.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
I believe it was Walter Mondale that President Reagan was debating, and he said that he wasn't going to hold his opponent's youth and inexperience against him in the debate. I'm the only non-attorney on this panel from either side. I'm Joe Citizen. I'm not going to hold their educations and most of their youth and inexperience against them, because I think I'm older than everybody else except for our Counselor Fry. Constitution was not written for constitutional scholars. It was not written for attorneys. I tell folks, if you need an attorney or a constitutional scholar to interpret it for you, you probably had a public education. Because they don't teach the Constitution in schools anymore. They don't teach the principles of liberty in homes, in schools, in churches, in communities anymore. I speak to grassroots groups, Tea Party groups across the country. A lot of patriotic Americans deeply concerned about what's going on in our country. And I'll hold these up and I'll ask them a simple question. How many articles are in the Constitution? Simple question. And generally in a room this size, there may be one or two people with certainty that can answer that question. How many are in your, I'm from North Carolina, this is our state constitution. U.S. Constitution has 7 articles. God gave us one for every day of the week. States were supposed to retain most of the power. North Carolina Constitution has 14 articles. If you can't answer those 2 simple questions about just how many articles are in there, you maybe had some Common Core math recently, also a public education problem. But if you can't answer those 2 simple questions about your state constitution and the federal constitution, you probably don't know enough about what's in them. We're not vetting candidates. Would you hire a doctor or a landscaper to do heart surgery without checking them out first to make sure they knew what they were doing? If we ask the wrong questions, the answers won't matter. We could spend the next 2 days sitting here debating with Mr. Dranias and Mr. Krauser the process of an Article 5 convention. And there's a lot of ambiguities and valid opinions, not facts, opinions about who would control a convention. Who has the more power, the states or the Congress? Under Article 5, Congress has the authority and the mandate to call a convention. Now we can argue all day long about whether Congress is going to be able to set the rules and pick the delegates and apportion the delegates, et cetera, ad infinitum. But at the end of the day, we're asking the wrong question. Have we even identified the correct problem? Our position at Patriot Coalition is that an Article 5 convention, and we're not opposed to Article 5, but at this point in time, for the reasons that the proponents are suggesting that we need it, is the wrong solution to the wrong problem. Thomas Jefferson said, on every question of construction of the Constitution, let us carry ourselves back to the time when the Constitution was adopted, recollect the spirit manifested in the debates, and instead of trying to what meaning may be squeezed out of the text or intended against it, conform to the probable one in which it was passed. Mr. Krauser referenced the Commerce Clause, and I've heard this not just from him, but from most proponents, that the words mean something different. Go look at Johnson's 1755 dictionary, which predated the Constitution. Look at Webster's 1828. Look at Merriam-Webster's 2014. Commerce means the same thing today that it did before, during, and after, and contemporaneously. The words haven't changed. The intent of the Constitution hasn't changed. The will of the people has changed. We are absentee employers, and we've let our employees run roughshod over our company, which is governing our government. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Mr. Krauser and Mr. Dranias if they'd like to pose a question to Patriot Coalition. And the Patriot Coalition, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Fry, will have 3 minutes to respond.
I'll go ahead and ask that first question. Article 5 is, I assume that you believe that it's there for a reason. What is the ultimate threshold that would have to be met to ultimately use Article 5?
you're asking me when would be a good time to start beating my wife? Seriously. I see a lot of people that are just looking for an excuse, a reason to trigger using an Article 5 convention. As if it's going to solve the problem. We haven't identified the correct problem. The Constitution, you agree, is not the problem. It's people violating it is the problem. Are there circumstances under which it might be a good idea? Yes. But that's not what we're here to debate today. I'm not going to give you a hypothetical of why we might use it at some point. But at this date and time, it is the wrong solution to the wrong problem.
And Mr. Lewis, Mr. Fry, I apologize. You each get 3 minutes, so it's a total of 6. So if you want to continue.
Would you like to?
Sure. What I would say is we certainly do not believe that Article 5 is meant to constrain the federal government. It's ridiculous to say that. No paper document can restrain the federal government. Apparently, the states who were made part of this federal republic, their primary responsibility was control of the federal government, right, with the aid of the people. And they're having a hard time doing that, right? And because we're not making them do that. A piece of paper is not going to constrain them. Article 5 is to correct errors. That's what most of the amendments are about, to correct errors and changing times. It is not to constrain the federal government. That's the job of the people and the states working together. The founders set up a participatory government, and let me tell you something, the people are a critical factor in that government. The elements of the federal government are the central government in D.C., the sovereign states, and the sovereign people. And the sovereign people are absent without leave, and now they wonder why things are going bad. And these folks want to say that, don't worry about it, it's not really your fault, it's a bunch of lying politicians in D.C. that are doing it, and we're going to correct the problem with an Article 5. So go home, watch your TV, have your beer, watch some football, and we'll take care of it for you. Not going to work, guys. It's our job. It's our moral job, and it's our patriotic job.
Thank you. Mr. Dranias, Mr. Krauser, you have 6 minutes to respond.
Will you answer? I'm going to take it.
I'll go either way.
Well, it's
Go ahead and go first, Mr. Dranias.
Notice what you did not hear. There's no answer to the question. They won't even give us an answer. But let me submit to you, there's a couple of obvious answers that anybody who believes in freedom should give. I mean, we don't want to wait till we can't possibly get 38 states to ratify something good, right? We don't want to wait till we're all in orange jumpsuits. We don't want to wait till we don't have any freedom of speech and everything we do is surveilled, cataloged, and databased by a government that can do anything it wants to us. And if you think that you don't want to wait till then, how close do you think we are to that point right now? I submit to you that anyone who reads the newspaper, and Glenn Greenwald is, no fan of the center right, but anyone who reads anything that's been published in the newspapers over the past couple of years about the reach and the scope and the intrusion of the federal government, anybody who reads anything like how the Supreme Court ruled on health care, anybody who sees the John Doe secret investigations in Wisconsin right now that we're targeting think tanks, ordinary think tanks, with secret dragnet searches of their electronic databases and what they were saying and how they were coordinating government union reforms. Anybody who's aware of what's actually going on in the world right now has to see that we don't have a whole lot of time before we just can't use Article 5 anymore. And so if they agree that it's there for a purpose and to be used, then they should agree, if they're reasonable, that now's the time. And mind you, the time is now with clarity on a number of issues, not the least of which is a balanced budget amendment. I just got to emphasize, folks, Thomas Jefferson saw this coming in 1798. In 1798, just about 9 years into the experiment, he said to a friend, if there was just one more amendment we could do, It would be taking away the power of borrowing from the federal government. I would rely on just that one amendment to restore the Constitution to its original founding principles. That's what he said. Why did he say that? Here's why. There is no parchment barrier that can hold back a politician with an unlimited credit card. Until we take away that unlimited credit card, we might as well be arguing against a wall. None of this education that we're all hoping for can take place when the guy next to you has a replicator machine and can give you anything you want. The words will just wash over most people because they can get a free cell phone, a free health care. They can get anything they want and they don't have to agree with you. So until the day comes that we finally listen to Thomas Jefferson and we take away the federal government's unlimited borrowing capacity, we will never even have the framework for the education that we all hope will eventually happen.
Thank you, Mr. Krauser.
What is the greatest problem in America? And Mr. Lewis, I would actually agree with you that the greatest problem that America is dealing with is an uneducated populace. Nobody's here arguing that we're not dealing with an uneducated citizenry. And I believe that a large part of the solution in America is to educate that citizenry. Thomas Jefferson said, educate the people and tyranny will vanish like evil spirits at the break of dawn. It was Benjamin Franklin who said, it is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins. We get that. We get that that's the problem, but why would we not deal with the symptom of the greater problem? We recognize that those within government are generally speaking a direct reflection of the people. When individuals in government when you have the mainstream citizenry not understanding the Constitution, we will elect individuals who don't understand those things either. But the problem is bigger than that. It's bigger than just educating the people. This has to be a multifaceted approach. Let's talk about whether or not Congress is in fact following the Constitution when it comes to the Commerce Clause. What has the U.S. Supreme Court said about the Commerce Clause? Basically, if it deals with production, distribution, or consumption, Congress can regulate it. So if I'm running a business in the state of Arizona and there is a remote possibility that the things that I'm creating could cross state lines, Congress can now come in and tell me how much I've got to pay my employees. They can tell me how many hours my employees are permitted to work. That's the interpretation of the Commerce Clause today. So to sit back and say that Congress is not obeying the Commerce Clause today is simply folly. They're doing exactly what the U.S. Supreme Court has said they can do. When it comes to the General Welfare Clause, it's the same thing. Perhaps the best way to put it on the General Welfare Clause, the way it was interpreted at the time of ratification versus today, is simply this. America then, give me liberty. America today, just give me. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And why can they do it? Because the U.S. Supreme Court has said they can do it. The only way you start to stop what it is that those in Washington or in Washington, D.C. are doing is to further narrow what it is the Constitution says. We're not asking to change, we're asking to further narrow, so there's no question about what that Commerce Clause means. So there's no question about what the General Welfare Clause means. So there's no question about what it means when we vest legislative power into the legislative branch of government. And then Nick is talking about going after one of the first provisions in Article 1, Section 8, the borrowing clause. Because if they were moral and virtuous people, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today talking about the excessive borrowing. But they don't care about their oath, and they don't necessarily even care about the quote that you cited to earlier, Mr. Lewis, with respect to Thomas Jefferson about going back and looking at the original intent. They're not concerned about going and looking at original intent. They're going to maximize their power by looking at how the Supreme Court has allowed them to do it. And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I've seen it. I've been out to Washington, D.C. I've testified in front of Congress. I've met with congressmen. I've met with freshman congressmen.
Mr. Krauser.
Very good. I'll get to it later. Thank you. I'm done.
Anthony, by my record keeping, the Patriot Coalition needs to respond, and then the Patriot Coalition gets a chance to ask Mr. Krauser and Mr. Dranias a question. Okay.
Mr. Fry, Ms. Counsel.
Well, the first thing I would say is that I think Mr. Lewis here does love freedom. He served in the armed forces. He served on a flight deck of a U.S. aircraft carrier for 2 campaigns in the Middle East. So to question his freedom, I think is questionable to do that. And I care about freedom, okay? But again, how is changing the Constitution going to make these folks obey the Constitution. Does anybody here really believe that our people in our government doesn't understand what the Commerce Clause means? Do these guys here to my left not understand it? Apparently they do. I do. Most people do. You probably should if you don't. They don't want to follow it. The question isn't if we can have the right words. If their solution will work, we only need one amendment. And that amendment is as follows. You must obey the Constitution, and we mean it this time. I don't think it's going to work, folks. It's our job, right? We have a moral responsibility. This country has been the freest and most prosperous country in the history of mankind. It was a gift from God. We have a responsibility to honor that gift, and that means to hold our servants accountable. That's part of the Judeo-Christian principle, right? If you have kids, you're responsible. If you have servants, you're responsible. They get out of line, you bring them in line. If you don't, you're responsible for what they're doing. Now, I'm not here to make you happy. I'm not here to make friends. And I love you all. I'm here to tell you the truth. And that is, we got to get off our butts and do our job and hold these people accountable. I don't care how many amendments you hand them. Until you hold them accountable, nothing's going to happen. Now, a lot of you have probably heard about the re-election of our senator in Kansas, right? He has been there for 47 years. He has voted for every piece of sustainable development he could, right? He voted for the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, which guts half of our Bill of Rights. He should have been impeached, and they sent him back. And I asked some of my friends in Kansas why. Because this time we're going to hold him accountable. 48 years is the magic number.
You get 30 seconds. Is that now? Was that per side response or?
By my timekeeping, both of you got 6 minutes to respond. It's your turn now to ask Mr. Dranias or Mr. Krauser a question.
Okay, so our time as far as responding.
You got 24 seconds if you want to use
24 seconds.
24.
204. If people won't obey the 10 Commandments, should we amend them? If your spouse is cheating on you, would you consider amending your marriage vows? If public servants won't uphold the Constitution, why is amending it the solution?
Can I take that?
Okay,
That was just my.
Oh, is that a question?
That was not the question.
Oh,
We would love that question.
Mr. Dranias, Mr. Krauser, you have 6 minutes to respond, 6 minutes total.
No, I was just using up the rest of our 30
Right,
seconds.
right,
he doesn't want us to respond.
Oh, well, you feel free to use some of your time do you have a response to that? But that was not the question.
Pose your question, please.
In your executive summary, and I'm going to read it directly so I don't misquote you. On the Compact for a Balanced Budget, you state, without this agreement in place, Article 5 would otherwise require the following legislative actions to take place before the Constitution would be deemed amended by the states. Can you explain where in the Constitution an authority is granted to amend the Constitution other than what Article 5 mandates? Because it says, without your Compact for a Balanced Budget, Compact for America, without this compact, Article 5 would otherwise require what Article 5 says you have to do.
Well, we all believe in the 10th Amendment, right? And one of the basic principles of the Constitution is if the power hasn't been delegated to the federal government, if it's not prohibited to the states, they retain that power. And it just so happens, and we know this from the fact that, well, the Constitution itself was originally a compact of sorts, that the states have the reserve power to compact over all the topics that a sovereign body can compact over. And the only limitation placed on the state's ability to compact or agree, by the way, compact means to agree. We're talking about a contract. Okay, so states have the inherent power to contract with each other to do things that states do. And there's nothing that prohibits them from doing that in the Constitution except for one provision, which says that they have to get the consent of Congress. So all of the powers that are not prohibited to the states, they can exercise through a compact. And all the powers that they retain, they can exercise through a compact. And so if you agree that Article 5 gives state legislatures, as it says, the ability to apply for a convention through Congress when 2/3 of the states apply, and if you agree that the convention, as the founders described it, would be a convention of the states and would be voting up or down amendments desired by the states as specified in the application, and if you agree that when the convention proposes those amendments, Congress has the power to refer it out for ratification by 3/4 of the states, either by state legislature or by state convention. And if you agree that the states, when 38 states do ratify that amendment, that it becomes part of the Constitution, there's no reason in the world why the states couldn't coordinate all that by an agreement in advance, fleshing out the entire process simply by reaching a contract with other states to follow it in precisely that way. And that's all the Compact for a Balanced Budget does. We've consolidated in one agreement all of the stages specified in Article 5 so that we can get it done. Using a compact allows us to get to an amendment with just 38 states joining an agreement and one resolution from Congress consenting or activating it, which is a lot easier than not having that agreement. Because without an agreement, you're going to have over 100 pieces of individual legislation over as many as 5 different legislative sessions and 2 congressional resolutions. So at Compact for America, we're very serious about actually getting to an amendment. And we found out, applying the principles of the 10th Amendment, how to do it easier. And by the way, we've got a great balanced budget amendment. If you want to read about it, we've got a paper circulating. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to use some of my time to talk about kind of backstep here for a moment on the marriage vow. I saw that the postcard that's being passed around, if public servants, if your spouse cheats on you, would you consider amending your marriage vows? Let's talk about the marriage vows here between the people and those in federal government. They're not keeping their marriage vows. So what do we do about it? I think they could use a little bit of counseling. A little bit of counseling. I mean, that's how we would correct the problem, is a little bit of counseling going on in Washington, D.C., and utilizing the Article 5 process to counsel them and to give them a little bit of discipline to start narrowing what it is that they're permitted to do. I know it feels like we're going around in circles here to a certain degree, because I would like to hear at some point address the Commerce Clause besides going back and looking at the definition of commerce from an 18th century dictionary. That would be great. We would all agree that that's what commerce means. But that's not the way it's being applied today from the U.S. Supreme Court. They've come up with their own interpretation because it wasn't narrow enough, apparently. But this notion that government doesn't follow the Constitution at all is absolutely folly. Freedom of speech still exists in this country. It is largely protected. Freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, the right to keep and bear arms is largely protected. The Supreme Court finally got on board in 2008 and 2010. Finally got on board. The Third Amendment, the courting of soldiers, the last time I checked, that wasn't going on. Those things are being upheld and protected. The Fourth Amendment, search and seize. Do we have issues on the horizon? Yeah, we do, but we're not acquiescing. We're litigating these issues. We're holding them accountable as best as we can. The Fifth Amendment, the right to remain silent, that is largely being upheld. The Sixth Amendment, the right to a fair trial, public trial, speedy trial, those are largely being upheld. The Eighth Amendment and cruel and unusual punishment, largely being upheld. So, 13th Amendment, involuntary servitude, largely being upheld. The 15th and 19th Amendment with respect to the right to vote, regardless of gender or race, largely being upheld. So to suggest that it's not being followed at all is simply incorrect. What we're saying is, where are the most significant abuses going on today? Let's identify where those are. Let's identify what they are. And utilize the tools that our founders gave to us, preserved for us, to have an impact. That's what we're suggesting.
Thank you.
Since Dranias and Krauser went ahead and both used their 6 minutes, go ahead and give Patriot Coalition 6 minutes to respond.
Would you like to respond?
Toto.
I got a quick comment. We don't have a budgeting problem. We don't have a debt problem. We don't have a credit limit problem. We have a spending problem. And we've looked at over 125 different proposed amendments, and not one of them, including the Compact for America's Balanced Budget Amendment. They've said we need to clarify the language. Not one amendment that we've looked at puts the spending of the federal government back in the enumerated powers box. Not one. It's a spending problem, not a budget problem. And the original intent of the Constitution is an oxymoron, because the intent of the Constitution was clearly defined in the preamble. And the preamble to the Constitution, the most important thing in there to me, is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That has never been amended. The intent of the Constitution has not changed. The usurpations of it has. And there is nothing in the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of interpreting the Constitution. We the people are. And if we think the Supreme Court is misinterpreting, or that Congress is misapplying, we need to do what Governor Zebulon Baird Vance suggested in 1876. And this applies not just at the federal but the state level. When you find you have scoundrels and scallywags in office, you need to turn them out. And you need to keep turning them out until you send honorable men to Washington. Until we stop sending garbage in, we're going to keep getting garbage out.
I don't want to make you guys attorneys, believe me. I think you're probably too honest and honorable to do that. So I'm not trying to do that. But let me say this. The Supreme Court has said that the 10th Amendment only reserved those powers that the states had before the Constitution. Article 5 is a provision for amendment of the Constitution to federal provision, right? The Supreme Court has said the amendment process is, in fact, a federal function. Whether it's Congress making the call, that's a federal function, or whether it's the states ratifying an amendment, that's not a state power. It's a federal function. It's a federal function arising under the Constitution. So the 10th Amendment has nothing to do with any powers that the states have under Article 5. It just doesn't exist.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask the Patriot Coalition if they'd like to pose a question to Mr. Dranias and Mr. Krauser. Okay.
I think it's Krauser and Dranias' turn to pose questions to them. Unless they've got 3 minutes and 18 seconds left. Do you want to use it up, or do you want to cede your time?
No, I would like to use it. I'm not an attorney. Now, this did not come from Mr. Dranias or Mr. Krauser, but in Convention of States Project, citing Dyer v. Blair in response to the Congressional Research Service reports that came out in 2014, which was an update of a 2012 report, said in Dyer v. Blair, Article 5 identifies the body, either a legislature or a convention, which must ratify a proposed amendment. The act of ratification is an expression of consent to the amendment by that body. We're talking about the convention itself. By what means that body shall decide to consent or not to consent is a matter for that body to determine for itself. And now this comes from Staff Counsel for Convention of States Project, Rita M. Dunaway. She added to that, while Dyer addresses ratifying conventions, the same rule applies to a proposing convention. Congress is a deliberative body performing a deliberative process authorized under the federal Constitution. It makes its own rules about how it conducts its business. The first bill they pass every year, H.R. 1, Senate Bill 1, is to set their own rules of how they're going to conduct their business, and nobody outside of that body can tell them how to make the rules. The same thing is true in the state legislatures, which is also a deliberative body established under a Constitution. An Article 5 convention for proposing amendments is the same way. It's a deliberative body performing a deliberative process. There is no deliberation if you're going to have the states separately decide what the language of the amendment is going to be. You're going to fly in, vote, fly out. Where's the deliberative body? Where's the deliberative process? It's not happening. We can't do it. There's no microwave solution to this. There's hard work to be done. And I talked about vetting candidates and electing good people. If we don't know what's in here and what our rights are, we're not going to ask candidates to write questions. We're not going to know what answers to expect back from them. And our duty doesn't just evolve around a couple of hours twice every other year in the primaries and general election. Sometimes we have to stand behind our candidates or our public servants, sometimes beside them, sometimes in front of them. But if all we do is vote and go home, we're going to keep getting the same problem. Changing words on paper will not change our problems.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Krauser, Mr. Dranias?
Well, I found interesting your claim that changing words on paper don't change problems, but you would agree for...
Won't solve the problem.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you something. Can I ask a two-part question with a preliminary and then a follow-up?
Please be brief.
Okay. You're familiar with the 16th and 17th Amendments, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The 16th Amendment gave the federal government the power to tax income. We now understand it, according to Justice Roberts, as an unlimited power, apparently. The 17th Amendment took the states out of their role in the Senate. Basically, the states controlled the U.S. Senate by proxy through appointed senators prior to the 17th Amendment. And that's very significant because in having that power, the states not only controlled half of the legislative power of the federal government, but they also controlled treaties effectively, controlled the appointment process through consent. So wouldn't you agree, A, that those were fundamental changes in the structure of the document of the Constitution, and B, there's no way to correct them except through an amendment?
Was that directing at the side or at me?
It could be either.
The 17th Amendment did not take any power away from the states. Oh, bear with me. Bear with me. The state legislatures ratified the 17th Amendment. The state legislatures gave away their power. They gave away their seat at the table. It didn't take anything away. The states gave it away. The state legislatures ratified the 16th Amendment. Look, in Arizona, you had a big fight over SB 1070. Did the Arizona legislature, or Arizona governor, Arizona attorney general, when Eric Holder came to Arizona with his lawsuit, which he filed in federal district court, did they do what the Constitution required of them? Governor Brewer should have told Eric Holder, with all due respect, sir, go away. Until you file your suit in a court that has constitutional authority to hear the case, we've got nothing to talk about if you have a problem with Arizona law. Did she do that? No. 27 states, mostly conservative-controlled state legislatures, enjoined a lawsuit against Obamacare under the same pretense that states would have their grievances heard in a lowly inferior court. Article 3, Section 2, Clause 2, Part 1 grants original jurisdiction to the Supreme Court only in cases involving sovereigns, that's sovereign states and foreign sovereigns. If the states don't exercise the constitutional authority they have now to stand up, we need strong state government to stand up between we the people and a rogue federal government. The states have all the constitutional authority they need to start this process. I agree with Mr. Dranias and Mr. Krauser. It's a multifaceted effort that needs to be undertaken. But they're jumping straight to playing Russian roulette with the Constitution. Except instead of only one bullet chambered, there's only one chamber empty. and we have nothing but empty promises that any proposed amendment will be followed, because it's going to go right back to the same Congress that right now interprets whatever amendments are on the table, however they see fit. And the states don't hold them accountable, and we don't hold the states accountable.
Time.
Mr. Dranias, Mr. Krauser?
I wish we would have gotten to the question. I don't know that we ultimately got to the answer to the question, which is, what do we do to eliminate the 16th and 17th Amendment? Let's just assume that Mr. Lewis is right and that the states voluntarily gave it up. If we're going to go back to the original intent, as Thomas Jefferson talked about, then what will we do to move the pendulum the other direction? Congress is not going to convene and give that power back to the states voluntarily. It's simply not going to happen. The only way that happens is through a state-initiated convention where the states say, we want our power back. That's the only way it happens. And so I don't believe that there's anyone up here that subscribes to the idea that the 17th Amendment was a good idea, or that the 16th Amendment was a good idea. So what is the proposal then to start eliminating those bad ideas that have infiltrated themselves into the Constitution? What is it? Do we just say, hey, state legislature, stand up? Well, wait a second. State legislatures are bound by the Constitution, and right now the Constitution and the 17th Amendment are one and the same. So what do we do about those things? The fact of the matter is, when we're talking about state power and state legislature standing up, what we're ultimately doing is, through an Article 5 process, is assisting in the state legislatures being able to do what ultimately the Constitution set out for them to be able to do. That's what we're trying to do here. And so, when you talk about the Article 5 process, do we really believe that the states are going to come together through the state-initiated convention and give more power to the federal government? I just don't think that's realistic. These people are going to come together, and at the end of the day, I think we ultimately come back with something that limits what it is that ultimately the federal government's doing now. That's the objective, is to restrain what they're doing, to redefine or narrow what it is that they're permitted to do, utilizing not only the text of the Constitution, but the way that the federal government is currently interpreting it.
Mr. Dranias?
Which do I have?
Well, if you want to take your 3 minutes now, I'd much rather do point counterpoint, let them respond, and then you close out with it.
That works.
Mr. Lewis, Mr. Krauser?
Shane, surely you're not implying that the states did not indeed give away their authority under the 17th. I mean, it was the states that ratified the 17th. I debated that issue with the Convention of States state director in Kansas, and I pointed out that the states had ratified the 15th, the 16th, the 17th. And he corrected me on that, though. He says, yeah, but Richard is not telling you guys that we had a big progressive movement back then. And my response is, well, what do you think we have now? Obamacare? That's not a progressive movement? There is a progressive movement. And let me tell you something. And Jeff can add to this. Some of these progressives that are promoting this Article 5 are working with the conservatives. Are working with the conservatives. George Soros is working with some of these conservatives. Right? So, you know, it is scary. And the states have in the past gave away their rights. Why in the world would a state give away its seat at the table? Why would it give up its ability to have control of the Senate? I don't know, but it did. Can it not happen again? Is it just impossible? They want you to believe that's just impossible? It's already happened.
I think I figured out what the answer to the question is. Bad, bad states. Bad, bad people. We all must suffer now for the bad decisions that were made. And there's no other option except to vote different people in and out, in and out. Look, the problem is structure matters in a constitution. If you consolidate a lot of power in an easy to leverage place, guess what happens? No matter who you elect, it gets abused. That's why we have separations of power. That's why the states were in charge of the Senate. It's because structure matters. It's not enough of a remedy just to vote new people in and out of government. If you put the shiny little object of total power in front of most politicians, sadly, not any in this room, they will tend to use it. And that's what the 17th Amendment did. And the answer to fixing the 17th Amendment is not to then vote new people in. It's not to get out our whips and start flagellating ourselves for all of our ancestors' misdeeds. It's to fix the problem with an amendment. Now, I grant you, it's probably unlikely that the best strategy is to go head on after the 17th Amendment in this political context, but you know what, we can be creative, right? I mean, we could think in maybe interesting ways. What if we had a balanced budget amendment that said that you, federal government, only get a fixed amount of borrowing capacity. You no longer can have unlimited borrowing capacity. You have a limit to your credit card. But if you ever want to increase it, you got to get the approval of 26 state legislatures. Now, that's just a wee little bit of power that the states used to have before the 17th Amendment, and it's targeted to a problem that everyone recognizes of goodwill. Now, what do you think the chances Congress proposing that directly are? Exactly. So let's get in the game. Let's, appropriately, say a bad word or two to our ancestors and get on with it. And pass the compact for a balanced budget, restore incrementally the power to the states that was taken away, and stop the problem of concentrated power in the federal government, which will always corrupt the system no matter who you vote in.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Mr. Fry, Mr. Lewis, if you'd like to respond. You've got 6 minutes.
Yes, we would. I'm not sure how much Arizona receives in federal monies, grants, etc., such as Title I, education money. It's a good bit. Does Arizona have any authority to accept money that the federal government doesn't have the authority to give? Whether they're printing it out of thin air or they're taking it from tax revenues, does Arizona have any constitutional authority to take stolen money or fantasy money that's been printed out of thin air? Do they? If we don't get the enumerated powers back, the federal government spending back in the enumerated powers box, it doesn't matter if you have a balanced budget amendment or a balanced budget or not. Or you can raise taxes or you can print more money to balance a budget. We wouldn't have a debt problem if the federal government was only constrained to spending on things that the Constitution enumerates that they can spend money on. But as long as the states are going to still take money for unconstitutional programs, the federal government's going to keep giving it. They buy votes with money. Until we, the people, get behind the states and say, stop taking the money. Get off of, stop going to see the heroin dealer and getting your fix. Stop being a distributor of the heroin that is federal money to people. We have to be more self-sufficient. We have to tell the state, we don't want you to take that federal money. We need to get rid of the Department of Education, the Department of Energy. The list is long and distinguished of federal programs that are unconstitutional, that the state governments are complicit in feeding off the trough of the federal monies. But the states aren't going to be able to do that either until we, the people, tell them, stop it. And then not punish them for it, but support them. As Sheriff Mack said, y'all had a panel discussion here back, I think it was in March. Whether it's the Compact for America, the Convention of States, or any of the other proposed methods of amending the Constitution, it's pie in the sky. It is literally pie in the sky. There is no magic bullet solution to solve this problem. Till we, the people, accept some personal responsibility and accountability for self-governance.
Time.
Thank you. Mr. Krauser, Mr. Dranias, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Fry, do you have questions posed for each other, or should we start going to the audience for questions?
I'd prefer to go to the audience.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any questions from the audience? Okay, if we could take you three right there. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, if you could just kind of form a line. Didn't want to create chaos, but form a line behind the podium there, and we'll start taking questions. If you could kind of keep it brief to the point.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a point, and any comment on it is welcome, because Mr. Fry asked a very good question. Why would they listen? And I'll tell you why, because if we bring this piece of paper that it was called with an additional constitutional amendment to Congress and it's ratified, we will be riding a wave of 38 states or more with a tremendous amount of power telling Congress for the first time ever in this method that we are putting the cuffs on you. And Mr. Fry, you talked about educating the populace. We are educating the populace right now with this process. And Mr. Krauser mentioned that we have tools. This is only one. And Mr. Fry, if you want to use other tools, that's great, but please don't handcuff our ability to use this one, because if we don't use it, God forbid, but I'm afraid that we'll end up having to use tools with bullets attached, with triggers attached. And nobody wants to see that. This is a tool, we need to use it. Please don't handcuff our efforts. And if you want to rebut that, why you should be handcuffing this people's attempt to do something that the Constitution enables us to do, I'd like to hear why.
Okay, we have 3 minutes to respond. If we could take 3 minutes from Mr. Lewis and Mr. Fry, that's total, and then 3 minutes from Mr. Krauser.
Well, again, we're not saying Article 5 is unconstitutional. We're not trying to handcuff anybody. But you need all the facts, and you need to understand what you're getting into. This is a serious situation. You know, this movement was started back in 1963 by the Ford Foundation, and at that time they spent between $500 million and $1.2 billion to initiate this movement. And initially it was the balanced budget. It's been the balanced budget. It's always been the balanced budget. Now, nowadays they have a flavor for everybody, right? There was 160 different amendments being proposed out there. The bottom line is, if we don't get control of these guys, we are going to have trouble. But you're not going to get control of them by sending them another piece of paper. We got 38 states that are going to get together, and that makes a difference. Well, rather than 38 states getting together saying, let's amend the Constitution that they're not paying attention to anyway, let's 38 states get together and saying, by God, you're going to listen, right? Assert yourself. You don't need to change the Constitution that they're not listening to. Stop taking their money. Make them fulfill their responsibilities and fulfill your responsibilities. The states have to fulfill their responsibilities. We have been had by a corrupted political system. What they're promising you now is they're going to change that corrupted political system by initiating yet another corrupted political system. That's what the Article 5 is. It's just another political system. Do any of you think you're going to be delegates? Do you? Who do you think is going to be delegates? In Kansas, they passed a delegate selection bill. It's going to be the House Speaker, the Senate President, and the Governor that gets to pick delegates. And those delegates don't even really get to vote on their own. They've got to call home to the Governor if there's a convention. That's the kind of stuff that's been promoted by the Convention of States and AAFCE. That's not going to solve the problem, folks.
Mr. Krauser?
Mr. Fry, quit telling the people that Congress is not obeying the Constitution at all. I outlined several examples of where they are complying with the Constitution. Are there issues? Absolutely. We stand on the same side in terms of trying to limit what it is that government's doing. We simply disagree on the tools. But I have a problem with you suggesting that the Constitution is not being abided by at all. Not at all. In other words, we don't have free speech at all. We don't have the ability to dissemble. Those cases are being litigated, every term in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And here's what I'm really hearing. If we can't win it all right now, don't fight it all. If we can't win, just let them keep dealing the heroin. Just let the states keep accepting the heroin and dealing it out. You know, the people out in Washington, D.C. and the powers that be, keep letting them throwing these addictive drugs our way. There's nothing we can do because the people are just uneducated, they're stupid, they're dumb, they don't understand the Constitution, so in turn they elect individuals who don't understand. I will not stand by and allow that to happen. I want to use my voice, and I'm going to use this Constitution that belongs to us. Right? It's designed to restrain government. It's not designed to restrain the people. It belongs to us. Why are we not using the tool that all of us up here agree the Founding Fathers gave us, who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor? They dedicated 1/7 of this Constitution to the amendment process. It was George Mason who refused to sign the Constitution until the Article 5 process was secure. Why? To allow the states to speak. To allow the people to speak through the states. Why would we not use this tool? 2014 is precisely what Article 5 was written for. A runaway train that's showing no signs of stopping. Derail the runaway train. Use the multiple tools available. Article 5 being one of many.
Thank you, Mr. Krauser. Next question.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming and speaking to all of us. I keep hearing about this number of citizens who aren't involved and don't care, and that's why we shouldn't do anything. And I submit to you, in maybe a couple of parts here, if my history lessons, I'm a product of the educational public system back before the education department became screwed up, or in charge.
Keep in mind you have 3 minutes.
What is it that we need? When George Washington and Jefferson and all the Adams and Madison and all the rest of them got together in Franklin and gave us what we have, I don't think they had a majority of Americans that wanted this. A majority of Americans didn't know what was going on and didn't even want a war. So are we supposed to wait until every citizen in this country understands, or every voter understands? Trust me, I've run for office twice. I haven't got them to understand yet. But I still deal with the Constitution when I go places and try to educate them. If we wait till the entire country, or the majority of 51 or 52% understand, we're going to be lost. This may not be the perfect process, but it's what it's got. I want you to tell me what, I honestly want an answer to this. I want to know what the magic number is before we, who you can see are concerned about this, no matter what side we're on, can do something to stop the out-of-control state, county, city, and federal governments we're all saddled with. That's all I'm asking. What's the magic number?
Mr. Krauser and Mr. Dranias, we want to respond to that first.
Well, for Compact for America, it's 38 states. We have an agreement among the states that fully settles all the questions about amending the Constitution in advance, cuts the number of legislative moving parts down by 60%. It basically makes the Article 5 process function more like a ballot measure. And so after this past election, when you have maybe 54 U.S. senators, a clear majority in the House, you have 31 to maybe 34 governors that are maybe more receptive to the balanced budget amendment idea than others. You have 68 legislative chambers out of 99, and maybe some more, that are also receptive to things like a balanced budget amendment. Just maybe now is the time to strike. And in fact, we have a plan to get the remaining 36 states we need to join this compact next year. We've already got Georgia and Alaska in it. All we need to do is get 36 more, get Congress to pass one resolution with simple majorities, and we will finally have a limit on the federal government's borrowing capacity, something that Thomas Jefferson asked for in 1798. And this is the thing. I want to go back to the fundamental point here. These guys apparently don't understand that structure matters. The allocation of power matters. They seem to think the ballot box is the sole remedy. If that were the case, how do you explain half of the things that are in the Constitution? Clearly the ballot box is only one of many remedies, And the principal remedy that the founders intended was a division of power. And what could be a more fundamental and important division of power than to give the states the fundamental ability to redefine the power of the federal government through Article 5, which is what state-originated amendments are. Think about it. If we believe that concentrated power is what corrupts and destroys a nation, and if the ultimate power to deconcentrate, to decentralize power, if the ultimate tool for that is Article 5, how can we be true to the founders' vision and not use it? It's time to use it. We have the tool to use it, the Compact for a Balanced Budget, and it doesn't just have to be a balanced budget. This is a beachhead. Once we get a balanced budget amendment, which we know has bipartisan support, we can run it again and again until we fix the whole system. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Not once today, and there will be video available of this discussion, has Mr. Fryer or myself said do nothing. Not once have either of us said that the Constitution is not being upheld at all. Yet that's what Mr. Krauser claims that he's hearing. With all due respect to the previous gentleman who asked the question, and I hear this from a lot of folks across the country, not from any one specific organization, but the people on the pro side looking for the easy way out are saying that if you don't agree with this triggering of a convention to amend the United States Constitution, remember Barack Obama said he was going to fundamentally transform America, and now I'm hearing that coming from the right, that we don't need a change in personnel, we need a change in structure. If you think this is a problem, then by all means, jump on board with trying to trigger an Article 5 convention. Put your all behind it. But that's not the answer. If you're not going to hold them accountable. In fact, I did not say that all we need to do is vote. In fact, I said the exact opposite. That if all that you think you need to do is vote, spend a couple of hours twice a month, or 2 times a year, every other year, and vote is the only engagement that you have to do to restore constitutional governance. It's a pipe dream. That would be pie in the sky too. We're not suggesting continue doing the same thing. That would be the definition of insanity. Education, education, education. We need to get educated, educate ourselves and everybody else. You have to elect better people to office, or it doesn't matter what this is. We can have an amendments convention every week, like the flavor of the week, and it won't change a thing if we don't change personally. The problem is not in Washington. It's not in Phoenix. It's in the mirror.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Next question.
If I may just on
Absolutely.
There are several people that have questions. If we all spend as much time answering each question, there's several people that will never get their question answered. If we could cut our answers back shorter so we can get more questions, I would be.
You have 3 minutes. If you want to cut that in half, that's fine.
I'd be fine with that.
Just make sure, 1 minute.
Question is for Mr. Fry. You made the statement that no paper document can restrain federal government. If that is a fact, how do you hold the federal government accountable when self-interest is always prevalent with all politicians? That's it.
That's a good question, and the answer is very easy. We hold them accountable. And the easiest way to do that, I don't think that we as individuals are going to be able to hold the federal government accountable. And the founders knew that wouldn't happen. Go into Federalist and look at 27, 28, 85. It's the states working together along with the people that are supposed to keep the national government in line. We don't take their money. We don't let them shove us around. We don't pass laws that acknowledge that they have the right to regulate firearms. And in fact, there's a great example, the Second Amendment. Can anybody think of a a clearer amendment that we currently have than the second that says the federal government shall not infringe? Since 1926, the federal government has regulated firearms almost out of our hands. They tell us what we can get, when we can get it, how we get it. We have to register it, on and on, background checks. It is regulated by the federal government. And it says shall not. We need to stop putting up, stop putting up with it.
Thank you, sir.
Real quick, parchment barriers actually do mean something, but just not forever. Nothing in life lasts forever, and that's why the states have to become familiar and use the power of Article 5 to restore the Constitution when it's torn down, to build new structures to protect us from new innovations in bad constitutional interpretation. I mean, it's a tug of war, folks. We live in a tug of war. There's never going to be a moment in this boxing match where you just knock the guy out on the other side and he's on the ground forever. So embrace the fact it's an endless tug of war. When the Constitution's torn down, we need to use Article 5 to build it back up. If you're asking me where in the Constitution we need to work, 3 obvious areas that can only be fixed with an amendment. We have to stop unlimited borrowing capacity in the federal government. That takes a balanced budget amendment. We have to stop unlimited taxing authority in the 16th Amendment. That's going to take a limit on taxation. And we've got to decentralize national policy making so it's not just the political class in Washington deciding everything. That takes repealing the 17th Amendment.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
My question is for Nick Dranias. I agree with you, Nick, that structure is important. And if you visualize the structure of a balanced budget amendment being a frame house, you've got to have a firm foundation for that house. And my question is, how do you get a firm foundation out of fiat money that can be continued to be created out of nothing? How do you balance a budget with fiat money when throughout history it's never been done? That's my question. And I think about the balanced budget amendment. Again, there's no mention at all in it about enumerated powers. If you will enforce the enumerated powers, you don't need this balanced budget amendment. So my question is, how do you balance a budget with fiat money?
Okay. 1 minute, can we amend it? We got to go into a discussion of economics and fiat. Look,
as long as both sides agree how much time each side gets.
Let me try speed talking this. First of all, where does the fiat money come from? Buying bonds. What are bonds? Borrowing. Limiting borrowing limits the amount of bonds. It's harder to produce fiat money. We don't address the entire problem instantaneously, but we do fix a substantial part of the problem of abundance of creation of fiat money. That's for round 2. That's the brilliance of the compact approach. Eventually, we can run it again and again and again as we start changing the culture with each victory. See, this is the problem with many folks on the right. You do not recognize that you educate through politics as much as you educate through books. Engaging the political process with Article 5 is a critical component to restoring the Republic. It's not just some sort of ancillary romp in the park. We have to use power to teach people how to use power. And that's what this is really the bottom line.
You know, it's interesting you brought that up, because the reason we have the fiat money is because of the money trust. The Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans are the one that set up through a fraudulent mechanism. They're the ones that set up and passed the Federal Reserve Act, right? There also have been involved, the Rockefeller folks are also some of them that started and are involved in this movement as well, and have been for decades. So, you know, how do you like that Federal Reserve Act? You're about to get a little taste of it, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Any other response? Okay, next question.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. I kind of see both sides, but I think there needs to be a punishment, and it needs to be severe. Okay? You've got the Republicans and the Democrats. Neither one go with the Constitution. Half of them don't even know what the Constitution is. When the country was first formed, representatives from the states came to Washington, D.C. and did not know what they were doing, they were ousted. We need a program. Like, for example, the Republicans, you know, what happened here in our state with the Medicaid, okay? You put people in office, they spend billions, which could take the deficit down for the amount of prostitution they use on the money, okay? But Republicans are doing all these things, like with the Medicare and whatever, and we've had all these things happen. When you go in and you put people in office, and then they don't even oblige to go with the party they're representing. I have a problem with both sides that don't give a damn about this country. There has to be, my question is, there has to be something put in place to cut them in half and to put them out of office. And I think there was at one time, besides this 4 to 6 years and life positions that they're in, and that's my I'm asking you, there has to be a punishment.
Response?
Mr. Dranias, I'm going to defer to you, given that Compact for America, you've written this, talking about the punishment included in there.
Well, one of the nice features of the balanced budget amendment that's in the Compact for a Balanced Budget, which by the way will be introduced, we hope, in 20 to 36 states next session. One of the features is a impeachment designation for a president that fails to respect the constitutional debt limit. Now, believe it or not, the problem with the current impeachment language in the Constitution is it's not clearly defined when it can be invoked, and that allows for a lot of political shenanigans. Our balanced budget amendment very clearly defines as an impeachable misdemeanor any failure on the president's part to respect the limit on the borrowing capacity of the federal government. Now, aside from that, look, this is the beauty of the Article 5 process. If you wanted to do a recall amendment, like we have in most states, you could do it through the Article 5 process, whether it's through a compact or a drafting convention. What I can pretty much guarantee you will never happen is that 2/3 of each House of Congress is going to directly propose an amendment to allow them to be recalled.
Response, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Frank?
Well, you know, you're absolutely right. We do need to hold them accountable, and it starts with us. We have to be determined to hold them accountable. And first, we have to know what our rights are, and we have to know what their obligations are, and make sure they understand what their obligations are. So, from that standpoint, you're right on point.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
The income tax that was promulgated by Congress and in statute was in July of 1862, and it did not change anything in Article 1. The 16th Amendment actually was not ratified, and it also did not change anything in Article 1. There is a $100,000 cash reward for anyone that can find the statute of liability by the 16th Amendment. And my concern is, we've been doing it wrong for over 100 years. I was only a PE major and I know how to read, but people, how can we tinker with the Constitution when we really don't even know what the law is?
Jim Clyburn, a congressman from South Carolina, was asked some questions about his understanding of the Constitution. He acknowledged on a national stage that most of what they do in Washington, D.C. is unconstitutional. That's a member of Congress. And when he was asked about what he should do about that, he says, well, we'll just let the Supreme Court sort it out. The bottom line is, when you look at things like the 16th Amendment, you may be absolutely right. You may be absolutely right, but the bottom line is Congress is going to do what they've been doing because the Supreme Court has sanctioned ultimately what it is that they do. That's the bottom line. They're in cahoots with one another, and until you create restrictions by narrowing the definition of what it means to tax or anything else, they're going to continue to do what it is that they do. Incrementalism is the way that we're going to change this thing. It's not going to happen overnight. And I know this isn't a motivational speech, but let's be frank. Success is on the other side of comfortable. This is going to be tough, tough work. And I believe Article 5, again, is one of the tools that we need to utilize.
Response?
Go ahead. You got something you want to add to that?
Yeah. Do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah. Yeah, well, Tom Cryer was a tax attorney who worked in both Republican and Democrat administrations. He said that this left-right paradigm, Democrats and Republicans are like two legs of the same pair of pants. George Washington in his farewell address warned us against partisan politics, putting party over principle. The founding fathers said, and Jefferson specifically, it matters of principle, stand like a rock. It matters of fashion, sway like the wind. We're not standing on principle. We've turned our rights into privileges, our principles into preferences. Madison said that this form of government that we have would only work for a moral and religious people. We're not a moral and religious people anymore. And until we restore our morality, you know what we're going to keep getting.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next question, please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I really appreciate this debate today, and I think everyone in this room agrees that we have a serious spending problem at all levels of government, and specifically federal. My concern is the clock is ticking, and time is running out. And we all know that the less time we have to resolve an issue, the more grave the situation becomes. I was delighted when former State Senator Jonathan Payton called me with the wonderful news that Proposition 122 had passed. And so when we're looking at a structural problem and we're looking at the tools to solve the problem, how do you envision Proposition 122 coming to play to resolve this spending crisis?
Well, I'm a big fan of Prop 122. I helped get a model legislation status at ALEC. Prop 122, for those who aren't familiar, allows for the states to designate federal laws, and automatically, by designating a federal law, all state resources will be denied the enforcement of that federal law. And because so much of what the federal government does is not funded and is offloaded to the states, this is an incredibly powerful vehicle because it shifts the cost of maintaining the size of federal government to the federal government and forces them to make tough calls on where they allocate their resources, and maybe will slow them down. And I think it's a great reform, and it should be spread to every state. But still, we're talking about amendments, and it really the ultimate way to fix the problem of the federal government's overgrowth is to limit its borrowing capacity first and foremost. As I said at the beginning, the way that the federal government expands beyond the limits of the Constitution is when a politician says, I can give you anything you want. And no reasoned case can overcome that if that capacity exists. That's why you have to limit their borrowing capacity to have a reasoned debate over the next steps.
Thank you, sir.
You know, what I keep hearing here is that we have some bad players. We have a Supreme Court that doesn't want to follow the Constitution. Congress doesn't follow the Constitution. We know the President's not following the Constitution. But yet what the solution is a structural change, right? So we're all sitting here at a poker table, and we have all these people, these promoters of the Article 5 coming up here telling us that the dealer at this card table is dealing from the bottom of the deck. He's a cheater. And their advice to us is that we ask for a new deck of cards. I say we get rid of the dealer. It's not a structural problem. It's a personnel problem.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
I want to thank everybody for coming down to discuss this as well. I have something of a different take on the subject. All four of you, I hope you will take a note here because you can look this up. You've all said that the 17th Amendment and the 16th Amendment were ratified by the states. They gave away the power. No, they did not. Article 5 of the Constitution specifically prohibits any amendment that deprives the states of their suffrage in the Senate without their consent. Utah and Delaware that withheld their consent by voting the 17th Amendment down. 8 other states withheld their consent by taking no action at all on the 17th Amendment. Philander and Knox was bribed to declare it ratified. It was not ratified. All the state has to do is pass a binding resolution stating that the 17th Amendment was not ratified, recalling McCain and Flake, who can then run for the office if they want to, and appointing new senators immediately. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you've all said the 16th Amendment was ratified. It was not. Too many states rewrote it first and then ratified something that had never been proposed. And you can find the certified legislative records in a book called The Law That Never Was by Red Beckman and Bill Benson. The state can do it ourselves. We don't need no stinking, well, frankly, I don't want to say that. I don't care one way or the other about the convention of states. I don't think we need it. I think we can do it on our own. And if they refuse to seat our new, properly, constitutionally elected senators, then they have seceded from us. We haven't seceded from them.
I could briefly respond. I mean, I respect your belief in that, but there's a lot of folks who disagree with your interpretation of the status of those amendments. But here's the thing. This is why a compact approach is so critical to Article 5. Because what's beautiful about the compact approach is you make sure that 38 states all agree to exactly the same thing within 7 years. Because we actually cause it to self-repeal if it's not done within 7 years. So you require all 38 states, probably representing a supermajority of the American population, in a short period of time to all coalesce around a specific reform. And on top of that, you have to get simple majorities in Congress to pass a resolution to activate that compact. Now, this is a massive political will that will overcome all of the hijinks you're talking about, because when push comes to shove, politicians, bad ones, are entrepreneurs. They're going to do what doesn't hurt so bad. And if they look out into the country and they see such huge majorities in such short periods of time clearly expressing what they want, they're going to yield to it for their own self-interest.
Thank you. Response?
I would really love to see 38 state governments get together and say, we're not going to take any more Title I money. We're not going to accept any more unconstitutional mandates from the EPA or the Department of Energy or the Department of anything that's not an enumerated power. Before we go tinkering on this, they act like Article 5 is the only article in the Constitution. How about we try upholding the rest of it before we trigger changing it? What message have we sent to Congress? Do we really even care if they uphold it? We keep sending the same people back. We keep taking the money. It's like going to the heroin dealer and saying, you're a bad man, now give me my fix. See you next week.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
This is for everybody. Somebody mentioned an unlimited credit card, which Congress has. And somebody also mentioned borrowing power, which is in the Constitution, that Congress has the power to borrow. But how do you stabilize this in your mind as being what we're doing now? When the money doesn't exist before it's printed, or before it's entered onto an electronic ledger for you as a debt, how is this in any way borrowing? And how does the Balanced Budget Amendment address this business of not having stable money that we can create its value back and forth at any time we want? How do you build a balanced budget amendment on something so unstable as this? And this is a fraudulent system according to the Constitution. It is not coin, not gold and silver, which has value within itself. It's whatever Congress and the insiders want it to be. And that's my question, is how do you build something on such an unstable basis of sand?
Well, this has got to be directed to me, right?
Well, no, to everybody.
Okay, well, if you go to www.compactforamerica.org, you can actually read the compact and the proposed balanced budget amendment. And not only that, you can go to the blog site and you can read the scholarly opinions of Dr. Sven Larson, Dr. Byron Schlomat, and others who've explained just how we can, at least in part, remedy the problem of too much fiat money through a balanced budget amendment. As I indicated before, if you put a limit on how many bonds the federal government can issue, as a matter of logical necessity, there is a limit on how many bonds can be purchased by the Federal Reserve to produce fiat money. But here's the best part about the amendment. If the bad guys in government who want to borrow to build government bigger and to play with the economy know that they only have a limited supply of borrowing capacity, they're going to have an interest in preserving the value of the dollar so that they can have maximum playtime. So this is how the balanced budget amendment can preserve the value of the dollar and limit the growth of fiat money.
So we're working within that fraudulent system to remedy it, right? Is that what we're trying to do, or get back to the constitutional gold and silver as legal tender?
I would agree with you. It's a fraudulent system, and a system that's been perpetrated on the American people, and we've paid trillions of dollars as a result of that. So, you know, something does need to be done about that. It is a problem, and you're right. We need to correct it. We need to correct the system and not let this kind of fraud keep going on.
Thank you. Next question.
I want to thank you all for coming. I wouldn't have missed this for the world. I facilitate a tea party in the state of Arizona, and we the people of the tea parties, we want to know. We are the people, and as we the people, we are wanting to learn about the compact and about the convention. Not against it, but about it. I was against it a few years back. I have learned since then why we need it. And to tell you the truth, Patriot Coalition, maybe I know I'm an out-of-the-box thinker, but I have been listening and listening, and everything that you're saying, every single argument you're giving, every single reason you're giving is all giving to the other side. You are actually giving everything that Mr. Krauser and Mr. Dranias are saying why we need an Article 5. You have not said why we can't. You're giving the reasons why we do, because we have a runaway Congress. The thing I really want to know, Mr. Lewis, is for you to answer the question that you never answered from the beginning, that Mr. Krauser asked you. When do you think that this country right now, who is dying and is hanging on for dear life to keep its freedom and its liberties and everything that we hold dear to us, when do you think is a good time that we need to actually invoke Article 5 of the convention that's been given to us?
Thank you for your impassioned question.
Well, let's just say, Mr. Lewis, if you want to give them more time to announce it first before we just arbitrarily change it.
We will give you more time to answer.
Mr. Moderator, I have to make a little bathroom break, so I'll be back and I'll trust my young team.
2 minutes
Go ahead,
each
Mr.
side.
Lewis. 2 minutes each side.
Has Arizona even dropped a complaint in the King's complaint box over the violations of the Arizona Declaration of Rights regarding the 2012 NDAA, the indefinite detention provisions? Has Arizona?
You're still dancing.
I'm not dancing.
You're dancing.
I don't dance. I'm good at it. I tried it.
1.5 minutes.
You're asking me to concede that Article 5 is a solution to the problems that we're having, and I refuse to do that. When is a good time to use Article 5? Okay, I'll give you a good time to use Article 5. We could use Article 5 right now if the Compact for America would propose that the 38 states that are trying to get to sign on to a compact, that the compact say, and that they actively, the legislatures, the governor, and the political subdivisions in 38 states would demand that their members of Congress propose an amendment to repeal the 17th so that the states could get their seat back at the table. That's using Article 5. If the people, look, that way we know what's coming out of it up front, and we know the language. Now they're suggesting that they can do that with a long list of compressing the entire Article 5 amendment process into one document, a microwave solution. Yeah, their compact Article 8, Section 1 says that if a member state enters into that there's a prohibition even against the residents of the state from speaking out against what the compact says.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Krauser?
Let's talk about how real change and restoration takes place in the culture, and we'll use the other side as an example. Woodrow Wilson in 1910 simply said this: "You may say that men and women are born free, but deep down in your hearts you know they are not." In other words, he was directly undermining the very principles outlined in the Declaration of Independence, which is the very foundation of our Constitution. He knew that he could not stand up in front of the American people in 1910 and make that argument with a straight face. So what did he do? He engaged the culture. And over 100 years, we've been dealing with this cultural battle, and we're sitting here in 2014 saying, what happened? The way that you start to make significant change within a culture is you use every single tool available to you. You engage in the political battleground, you engage in the cultural battleground. You utilize principles like Article 5. You utilize principles like nullification. You utilize then in the cultural battleground things like taking back the media, taking back radio, taking back TV, taking back your school boards. Stop suggesting that there's only one solution, because I know most of you in here and you know what I stand for, and it's all about educating the people. If you've heard me speak, that's all I talk about. But it's not the only solutions. It's married to all of these other solutions. We should be engaging all of these things at one time. At one time, not saying, well, we're going to try this one and see if it works. That's not how the other side plays. That's not how they play. And Mr. Dranias mentioned this earlier. If we don't use Article 5, the other side will use it. If we don't use nullification, the other side will use it. If we don't engage the culture, too bad. They've already been doing it for a long, long, long time. Let's start to use the tools, and let's get serious about this. And I'm not suggesting that Mr. Lewis and company are not serious about it. But I'm saying let's engage everything that we have. We all love our freedom. That's one thing that brings us together today. We all love our freedom. So what will we do together, standing on that on identical foundations, to make this happen? I believe Article 5 is simply not a tool that can be ignored. It was put there for a reason.
Thank you. Next question.
Well, thank you. I think I'm one of the few young people here, one of the few candidates that ran recently for November 4th State House, and I'm proud to be in the House of the people today. With Christmas right around the corner, you know, we always love to get gifts and open them, and I hope that those elected to the Congress will give us the gift of freedom, and I think both sides can agree on that we the people want our freedom and liberty. Nancy Pelosi said that we have to pass it before we know what's in it. And I think on both sides of the aisle, both political parties have done their fair share of hurting the people. It's in Arizona, the electorate, only 47%, is quite frightening, and it's sad to me as a native of Arizona. But all four of you have inspired me today, and I hope the rest of us to at least write our public servants, and I'll get to my question, but write them and ask them where they stand on this issue. And I would hope that the four of you do as well in those 38 states that you proposed. But my question is two-part. It is with Article 5, does this have teeth to control those elected in office if they will not balance the budget, but also what are the time constraints on this Article 5 if it is passed in terms of its effectiveness? So hopefully if there's any clarification on that question.
Just real quick, we're running out of time, so if you could make your comments brief, and then I'd like to give these two other gentlemen real quick time to ask a question and respond. So If we could speed it up so we can get out of here by 5.
Well, the short answer is go to our website, compactforamerica.org, and read the various scholarly articles there, and you'll get a complete answer. But the short answer is this. A well-designed amendment doesn't rely on angels in government. A well-designed amendment divides power and makes sure that people who are the wrong people do the right things for the wrong reasons. And so what our balanced budget amendment does is it basically says to the political class, you only get so much borrowing capacity. Then that's going to give them an incentive to preserve the value of the dollar. It's going to give them an incentive to prioritize. It's going to give them an incentive to finally create a budget. It's going to give them an incentive to finally resort to first principles in deciding what goes in the budget. So what you do is you try to align the incentives, the self-interest of the bad actors with the right outcome. And that's what our amendment does.
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Fry?
There's no amendment that's going to make them do anything. The balanced budget amendment will not make them balance the budget. 49 states have either a constitutional or statutory requirement to balance their budgets. And they put items off budget so that they can put the states in debt. How much is your state in debt?
$22 billion.
$22 billion. And your state has a constitutional amendment?
It has statutory.
A statutory balanced budget requirement. My state has a constitutional requirement for a balanced budget. It's on paper to balance our budget, and they balance our budget by putting things off budget.
Thank you, sir. Next question.
Yes. Hello, gentlemen. This is my first live debate, so I've enjoyed it. I think all four of you agree on a couple things. You know, one, that Washington's out of control, and I think someone said, you know, look in the mirror and do something about it. You all four agree on it. The gentlemen on the right, they pose a plan. It's reasonable. They put it up there for everybody to look at and debate. Gentlemen on the left, you continually say, we have to go and vote the right people. I think the gentlemen on the right agree with that. That's one part. What I'd like to hear from the gentlemen from the left are, you know, in a debate why their plan doesn't work, but don't go back to the well, we need to vote the right people. They agree with that. And the second thing is, if you're not going to debate why it's wrong, then provide your solution, a logical, reasonable solution that everybody can follow. Thank you.
Okay. I take exception to being referred to as from the left. The actual people from the left call me a right-wing nativist extremist. And the neocons and neo-fascists from the right call me a crazy constitutionalist. I thank both of them for those attributes. We do all agree and care deeply about liberty. But to suggest that we haven't given you, I'm sorry, we've not given you a microwave solution. We have not and will not absolve you or ourselves of the personal responsibility and accountability to give due diligence to our jobs, both morally and civically, to educate ourselves, our families, our fellow countrymen about the principles of liberty and about the supreme laws of the land. There is no magic answer. I'm sorry. I wish I had one. Article 5 is not it. And I go back to what Sheriff Mack said about it here earlier this spring. It's pie in the sky.
We can move on. We got closing statements as well if we're going to do
Yeah,
that.
we got to do closing statements. Real quick, please.
Yeah, let me just say, again, amending the Constitution will not turn corrupt politician into statesman. That's not going to happen.
Thank you, sir. Real quick, did you want to respond? Okay. Do we have one more question? Oh, okay. Make it brief, sir.
As I listen to this, it sounds to me very much like the kind of matters that the Constitutional Convention, original Constitutional Convention, were really deliberating. We're dealing with how do people be moral? How do they make proper judgments? How do we control the desire of people to control others and to dominate and get their wishes full? We're really dealing with where people are. You were talking about making people more moral in their behaviors and judgment. People, if men were angels, then we wouldn't be having this. So there have to be some kind of controls that are there to limit people's ability to dominate and control others. Money is not the answer to all questions, but that's the way things really are we really deal with. People want this kind of benefit, they want that kind of benefit. We all have personal responsibility, and that's kind of underlying this. But so I think that it is necessary, in view of the fact that men are not angels, you still have to have rules, and a piece of paper, a parchment of paper with those rules is our best direction.
Thank you, sir. Any response?
We have it. It's right here. I suggest we all read it.
Thank you.
Oh, but that's not saying we don't have it. We do have it. We just have to use
How
it.
do you make people moral?
Okay. Can't make people moral. I mean, I never suggested making them moral. What I said was Madison said that this form of government would only work for a moral and religious people, that it was totally unsuitable for any other.
Thank you.
So, restore our morality.
15 seconds, I'd like to respond. This is a two-pronged approach to winning back America. There's a spiritual battle that has to take place when we're talking about moral and religious. That's one part of the battle. The other part of the battle is the restoration of the rule of law. Take those things on at the same time. You don't just say spiritually we're done, so we're going to leave the rule of law just out to dry. Let's engage this in a two-pronged fashion to really see real restoration. Multiple solutions, let's use them all at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Krauser. We have closing statements. We're going to, if each one of you would end with a closing statement, 2 minutes maximum. It's a compliment is to 5. So, Mr. Krauser.
And I'll make mine relatively brief. Article 5 is in the Constitution. I guess perhaps the most disturbing part of this is that, to a degree, the opposition has treated Article 5 as toxic. They revere and honor the Constitution to a degree, minus Article 5. Let's don't use it. My simple suggestion is this: stop playing checkers while the other side plays chess. Stop playing marbles while the other side kicks us in the teeth. That's all I have to say. That's what we have to do. Let's start getting serious about freedom. James Iredell was the first Supreme Court justice appointed by George Washington, and he said this: you can only defend liberty when the people are jealous enough to defend it. We've got to be jealous enough to defend it and use the multiple tools that have been given to us through our Constitution and elsewhere to really win back this battle for America.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dranias?
I want to identify the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the fact that the Senate President, Andrew Biggs, who is a great legislator, last year would not allow a single Article 5 resolution to be heard or debated on the floor of the Senate. I'd like to see a show of hands in this room as to whether they think, after hearing today's debate, whether you agree with us or not, whether that should be the same outcome this coming session. If you agree that President Biggs should not allow any debate on the floor of the Senate, regardless of where the votes are, on Article 5. Who agrees with that?
Where is President Biggs?
And I know for the record, no one has raised their hand, not even those who we all are aware are opposing Article 5. I don't even know if our colleagues raised their hand. And I think that's how I'd like to end my comments.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fry?
Well, again, a piece of paper is not going to make corrupt officials statesmen. It's our job to make them do their responsibility. If we don't hold them accountable, all the amendments in the world aren't going to make a difference. They're going to ignore them like they've always ignored them. They've been doing it for 80 years. Once we start holding them accountable, then you don't need to make the changes. And I don't know what the other side is. Does anybody here really think that it's just the Democrats that have done this? It's been both parties that have been doing this. Both parties have ignored the Constitution. Both parties have taken advantage of our liberties. It's not us and them. It's not Democrats and Republicans. It's the system. It's our political system that's corrupted and broken, and we need to get it back. We need to assert ourselves. That's the problem. Get ourselves educated and make them do their job or get rid of them.
And Mr. Lewis.
Mr. Krauser mentioned Justice Iredell. Justice Iredell was from North Carolina. At the North Carolina Ratification Convention, one of the things that Mr. Iredale said was a Constitution should be understood by everyone. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I was trying to actually pull it up, but in the interest of time, I'll just paraphrase that even the least reputable among us deserves to know where they stand. The Constitution is written in simple language. It was written for shopkeepers and farmers to understand. It still says what it meant in 1787. It still means what it says. We can pretend it doesn't. We can pretend that we've got to change shall not be infringed to something more strong, or that Congress may pass no law. I don't know how much simpler we can put the language. We can pretend that commerce means something other than what it meant then, before, during, and after. That it still means the same thing now that it meant then, that words mean something. We have to use some common sense here. And there is no microwave solution. So I say an Article 5 convention, and we're not opposed to using Article 5 under the right circumstances for the right reasons. But for the reasons that is being proposed that we use it today, I don't trust the state governments who currently want to uphold the Constitution to pick delegates to go to a convention to rein in an out-of-control federal government. The state government is just as out of control, and it's we the people's fault. If people won't obey the Constitution, amending it won't fix that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. That ends our panel discussion on the Article 5 Convention. I want to say thank you to each one of you for attending. Thank you to our panelists, and especially the ones that flew in from out of town. From what I heard, they used their own mind. And I want to give a special thank you to Marcus Kelly for putting this together and creating my notes. Anyway, have a safe drive home. Have a good evening.